Welcome to Eminence TV Live, our weekly rundown of tournament tEDH and what's going on in the tEDH community. I'm Chris. No, I'm Scott. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jamaican dude. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Moxfield and the Epic Storm, without whom this wouldn't be so amazing. If you're enjoying Eminence content and would like to see more, please consider subscribing here on Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to one channel a month for free with Amazon Prime Gaming. That's right, it's free. And give it to us. We'd love if you'd consider using that on us. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/EminenceMTG. Your pledge there goes to improve the programs of Eminence tEDH University, among many other things. We'd be so grateful for your support. On the topic of Eminence tEDH University, after this program ends, we are going to segue almost directly into the tEDH University seminar that is following this broadcast, hosted by one of our current guests and then a wonderful new guest named Accepted. Everybody knows them. Before the show, we had Billy say that they were Chris, and so everyone is Chris for the rest of the program. All our names are spelled differently. We have Chris with a K, Chris with a CH, Chris with a single C, and then one that is an X at the beginning, and it's Chris. Eminence dates and info coming up. Mox Masters 2 is over. It was won. It was beautiful. Dargo Thrasios won it all. We have that deck list for you, and Ashani is going to post it in the chat any minute now. We have any minute now. We have Silicon Dynasty, our premier West Coast event, coming up in San Jose, California, January 13th through the 15th. If you do not go there, I will be held over a fire on a spit. It all comes down to me telling you to get there. Please, for my benefit and my family, so they don't have to say goodbye to me, please go to Silicon Dynasty in San Jose, January 13th to the 15th. We have Plant City 2, March 24th through 26th in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which I will be at in the flesh if I do not get cooked. We return to Phoenixville for our second Plant City event. It's going to be a blast. Speaking of a blast, the Cookout, July 28th through 30th. Staying on theme of me being cooked, the Cookout is in Atlanta, Georgia. Shani and I will be there calling all the shots. It's going to be amazing. And then finally, next year, Windmill Slam, September 23rd to the 25th, returning to San Jose, California. Very exciting. Huge year of events coming up. And speaking of a huge year of events, Command Tower is live for shops and TOs globally to use. Memberships go from $5 a month and up. Shop partnerships are live. The shop partners sponsor a player or players in the main Eminence events. Shops purchase their entry and hold a cEDH event at their shop, with the winner getting the sponsored ride to Silicon Dynasty. And when I say sponsored ride, I mean your ticket gets paid for. You got to get there. Use your legs. We reserve a certain amount of tickets for shop partners in an effort to bridge the gap between large-scale event systems and LGS-level scenes, supporting the community and its player bases everywhere. If you are a shop and would like to partner with us to become a feeder for a upcoming Eminence event, please contact us at, I believe, contact@eminence.events, or message us in our public Discord server. Another important announcement to make is that Silicon Dynasty is a 4K now. 4K paid out on site at the end of the event, which is just a very attractive thing, honestly. I'm a huge fan of that, and I believe the players are too. We'd love to have you there. We'd love to have you vying for your shot at a chunk of that huge piece of change. This week, we have very limited Reddit controversies for you. In fact, we don't have any controversies. All we have is a tournament report from one of the players in Mox Masters December, 4Con, who played into very, very late into the tournament. I think they were top 4? Or
yeah,
top,
they made it.
Yeah,
they made it to the final table.
Yeah, they made it to the final table, which is exciting. and I think the review is extremely detailed. It is very long. It is another Blue Farm tournament report. Blue Farm good in tournaments, as it turns out. 2022 year of Blue Farm. We
Blue
have
Farm overrepresented in tournament. Year for Blue Farm. I don't know, maybe. That's what I have to say.
Sean, I've put it off long enough. I will not let you stop me any longer. I have to introduce our guests now. You can't bully me anymore. This week, we are joined by the wonderful folks from Commander and Coffee. That is right. We have Billy and Chris here from Commander and Coffee. Billy and Chris, say hello collectively, both at the same time.
Hello. You
Hi,
were too
I'm
late.
Chris.
Come on, what are you doing again?
Wow. Disappointing each other on this stream and in their own podcast.
Not wrong.
Yeah, that tracks.
That's 100% true. Like I'm really disappointed in him as a father figure to him. Like it's pretty rough.
It's hard when your son strays like that.
Yeah,
Your son
exactly.
has a very impressive set of facial hair and seems to be older than you, but that's okay.
Well, all of that is true.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
all right.
hold on. His facial hair is not that good. We'll come back to that one.
All right, we
Listen,
will come
I just
back
had to go to a wedding with him.
It is certainly a topic later. We will come back to it. Would you please introduce yourselves, where people can find you on the internet, and what you talk about if they've been living under a rock for the last year?
Chris, you can go first.
Yeah, so we're Commander and Coffee. We are a podcast dedicated to talking about sweet brews, both in the Commander, tEDH, EDH space, as well as coffee addicts is us. And we do a lot of neat things. You could find us at CMDR_COFFEE, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. On Twitter, that's our primary space where you can find us, and we talk about all kinds of fun stuff like that.
All right, Billy, your turn.
So I'm Billy. Hi, I'm the other one of the other parts of Commander Coffee. I'm the one that usually is on Twitter responding to everybody. So yeah, hi, that's me. Find us there. We could put our Buzzsprout in there, or all our Linktree and stuff like that. Not Buzzsprout, Linktree. But yeah, pretty much everything. It's kind of a passion project, so to speak, for us, and we just love talking about all things brewing.
Excellent. So tell me, first of all, who did your logo? Says ZRob0 in the chat.
That's a question for you, Chris.
So we outsourced our logo by the fine folks over at Fiverr. We use their services to help craft our wonderful logo for this podcast.
I like your Lotus latte art. It's very cool.
That's what we went for.
And MTG the Epic Storm says, wow, all of my favorite Commander personalities and Ashani. Hello, Bryant. How are you?
That's a Bryant.
Hello. Thanks.
Well, this week we have a thing that I'm very excited to talk about, and it is the hot button, hard hitting Commander tournament issues. And I could think of no better people to bring on and talk about these things with than people who are caffeine addicts and will bring extreme energy. That's what we need. We need extreme energy. Cannon Shot says, hey, Commander and Coffee, what are you two thoughts on reusing coffee for 2 to 3 days? I feel like it's good.
I totally agree.
Why?
Before we go any further, we need to talk about this.
Hold on. No.
Actually, let me set the tone. This person use the same coffee grounds multiple times per day for multiple days. How do you feel about this?
After 2, it's got to be just water at that point. Ugh.
No, it's just mud. It becomes just mud. It's not even good anymore. It's kind of like when you leave your cold brew in the cold brew maker for too long. It just becomes this you ever as a kid put sand in one of those things and shake them out, and then you just see that film of that sand at the bottom? Yeah, that's what it becomes, and it's just disgusting. Just don't do it. People, don't do it.
People don't. Okay. So we should not try to save money and use our coffee grounds multiple times.
If there's anything you're going to take away from this, is brew good coffee.
Before we go any further answering what is sure to be a deluge of coffee questions from the chat, Can you tell everybody a little bit about your experience with the lovely caffeinated brown liquid? Shawnee, we'll start with you.
Um, my coffee
I'm
experience is
kidding.
very
I'm
low.
messing with
I'm
you.
a,
Chris
yeah,
and Billy, please. The
I'm a tea
coffee,
guy, so I
the
don't know.
coffee experts.
Billy
So
is by far the coffee addict of the two of us comparatively.
I'm on cup number 3 today.
Okay.
And that's in, well, I got up at 7, so we're going 12 hours. I've been drinking coffee since I've been maybe 13 years old, 14 maybe. It stunted my growth. That's why I'm only 5'3". Hey, it happens. Um,
It happens.
but no, I've evolved from the standard like Folgers to Keurig to brewing my own at home with all kinds of different coffee brewers, espressos, the whole nine. I drink it black, only black. It's one, it's better for you. Two, it tastes better. You could actually taste the coffee. You're not tasting the flavor creamers or anything like that.
Sure,
When I
sure.
was on keto for 18 months, I drank pretty much nothing but black coffee, and it was very good for my energy levels and very bad for other parts of my body. But, uh,
Facts.
yeah. So this week we have exciting topics to talk about, and we will be taking questions from chat because this is kind of a round table discussion. I need to fix my shirt, starting to show a little cleave. Not good for the TOS. Uh, Mox Masters was this past weekend, and several things that we saw on Twitter were Twitter was a buzz with Mox Masters topics. Most notably, time in rounds was discussed, the efficiency of player actions, and slow play was a thing that got brought up. From a judging standpoint, I don't believe that playing slowly counts as slow play, but for the purposes of Commander tournaments, I'm interested to know what your perspective is on allowing players to call a judge when someone is seemingly intentionally playing very slowly.
Yeah, so you absolutely should, like 100%. I'm on the basis of you need to call a judge, right? The game of Magic is a timed round at 75 minutes. Players need to be taking game actions in an appropriate time frame. So players taking, 3 minutes on turn one to make their turn, you need to get a judge in there and say, well, what's going on here? This is taking a long time. There's okay to have breaks where it's a longer turn. It's you just add an Oz or something like that, and you need to think through it. But that's not the norm of every single turn. Play your land, cast your spells, and let's keep the game going.
I
Yeah.
mean, most of the time, you should be thinking ahead. What fetch are you cracking? Or you're cracking your fetch. What can you get? Like, if you crack a Flooded Strand, there's only 5 outcomes that you could potentially get. Like it depends on your colors and stuff like that. Like, you should know what you're fetching for. D-tutor, vamp tutor, all the same things. Like, if you're thinking right then and there when you're like, I'm just gonna slam this vamp tutor, well, and you don't know what you're gonna get, you probably already lost. To be quite honest, you just give it up, scoop it up.
Scoop it
Wow,
up. Okay. Wow.
that's
Okay.
that's bold. So what is the limit do you give someone for the time? Like, when do you start calling a judge? Like, should they take 3 to 5 minutes to fetch a land? Should they take that long to play a land? Like, when do you think you start making the margin of this is slow play?
Me personally, you got like 45 seconds. Let's go. But no,
Okay. All right.
realistically, it's like 1 to 2 minutes. Like
I
if
was gonna
your
say,
if your
I give
turn
people about
timer
2
takes
minutes.
longer than that, it's too long. Like you need to be making game actions.
The thing that I've run into before is the classic Sensei's Divining Top scenario or Thrasios activation scenario where you look at the top of the deck and put it down, you look at it again and it hasn't changed, and then you put it back down, and oh no, there it is again. I'll put it on the bottom of my deck, and then you look at the top of your deck and you put it back like you don't have to flip it immediately off of Thrasios to put it into your hand. I think that there's a ton of room for players to improve mechanically, and I think if people improve their mechanical Magic playing skill, we'll see a lot less rounds going to time. There are things like Sensei's Divining Top activations or Thrasios activations that once you do them enough, you should be fairly certain what you're going to do with something. Like if you're digging for interaction off your Thrasios, but you flip a win con and you need interaction, put the win con on the bottom. Stop overthinking things. Like you're gonna lose if you don't get interaction. And the same thing for top. You should probably have a plan to play if you're going to play top. And I'm not sure how much top issues there were at Mox Masters, but I know Thrasios was a notable thing that people had to deal with.
Yeah, there was a lot of
So
Thrasios
There's an
activations.
old there's an old additive back in Legacy, like when Top was if anybody who plays Legacy, you know, like the Miracles Top days. I'm dating myself, I'm an old man. Back when you had that interaction, that you had to know how to play your deck and you had to play it quickly. And if you were actively going to play it to be good, you had to practice it and learn your interactions so you can play it at a faster pace because you just wouldn't have the time to finish your rounds ever.
but
Same
that
thing
was just
applies.
go ahead.
Same thing applies into the cEDH when you're talking about things like Thrasios activations and things like that. If you're actively playing slow because you have to take time to think through your plays, you need to practice your deck. You need to just goldfish and practice that and understand how the game states work and play through that. You can't just be waiting forever. It slows the game down. You're never going to finish your games. You're going to end up draws. You're not going to get the wins. And you're not going to move on to top 16s or onwards.
One of the things that Chris and I used to do, growing up in Magic, so to speak, is we used to actually set up chess timers for ourselves at 25 minutes. The same thing you'd get on MTGO.
Mhm.
And that was when we did like limited and 60 card, and you know, we tried to bring it into Commander way back when we first started. Some of our play group was they liked it a lot. Some of them, not so much.
Mhm.
But like that helped us as players grow to be able to play and think. And like one of the things that Chris honestly drilled into me when I first started was literally memorize your entire deck, know what each card gets you in what situation,
Yeah.
and that really helps out a lot. So
I think there's this culture of making constant changes and revisions to decks before tournaments that kind of interferes with that whole concept that maybe is another important thing to think about before the tournament is that you should know your deck inside and out, and maybe those last minute changes for a perfect what's the word,
information.
perfect optimization, right?
Yeah.
Those last minute changes are maybe not as fruitful as playing a deck that you know front and back,
Yeah.
or
And there's
as
definitely
timing.
decks that can do either or. There's a deck you could pick up and play, and I'm not going to name decks, but decks that are really slow and grindy with activations and Thrasios, and
Mm.
like you're playing like anything with like Seedborn Muse in it, which I hate that card. You have to understand that you're going to make a lot of game actions, take a lot of time. You have to be quick and efficient with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
the
what?
Rube Goldberg machine ones. You gotta
Yes.
be quick.
So what about the aspect of when you play quickly, you have a tendency to maybe make mistakes. Like so I guess like learning the deck and knowing the ins and outs of the decks is agreed, but some people just pick up a deck maybe is considered the best deck. They didn't get their reps under in before the tournament. That might be just poor preparation on their side. But some people like the slower you play, you get to think around all the interaction that could be possible, everything that you have to play around, all of that some that I can see where like the time comes in. Like, okay, here's this inline tutor. Okay, now I look on the board. Okay, now I check my hand. Now I'm not gonna think about all the possibilities of what this top card can do for me. And then after that, then you think about it and like, okay, maybe this is not what I need. Like I understand like seeing it through casting Saturday of how all the Strasios activation took a lot of time. And like I wanna say play faster, but at the same time, like you're playing for something on the line and you wanna make sure you're making the best decision. So does it come down to where play the deck you're most comfortable with and play the deck with the most reps? Is that what we should do? We bring
Oh,
the deck to a tournament?
a little bit of both, in all honesty. So like in the whole play speed and everything like that. So that entire question that you just asked took almost 2 minutes. That was a
Right,
long time. So
right.
like if somebody can't think through their entire deck, their entire line like that, like you got to pick. That means you picked up the deck like yesterday, day before yesterday, kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of times that you need, if you're going into a tournament where there's serious money on the line, you're going into a Punt City, a Silicon Dynasty, where there's $4,000 on the line. If you didn't get the reps in yourself, that's on you. Like, don't take it out on everybody else, because it's not just you that you're hurting. You're actually hurting other people,
Yeah, where are our skill issue emojis in the chat?
It
right?
also doesn't like it doesn't mean you have to like fully understand the deck. You just have to know. Like one of the things that Billy does that used to drive me crazy is he would cast like an Enlightened Tutor, and I'd be like, "What are you getting?" And he'd be like, "I don't know." I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? How are you casting a card and not have any idea at all what you're looking for? Like, right? You're
Yeah.
spending that
What
resource and you don't even know the artifacts and enchantments in your deck. Like that's a
exactly, and
problem.
that was one of the things that was drilled out of me before I even started going to tournaments, before I even started with this podcast and stuff like that. Now it's like, okay, well, I know that I could get this Underworld Breach here, but in this situation, I should get the blah 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 blah, blah and go from there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's okay to take that second to look through to make sure what you're thinking about is correct, but you should have an idea as to what you're getting. You shouldn't just go in there going, I need to hope find something.
Yeah, I tripped somebody out because I Praetor's grasped them, and what I thought they were running was a pretty standard deck that's on the whatever list you're looking at, and I noticed that it wasn't as I'm flipping through with the Praetor's grasp, and I went, okay, cool. Don't mind me, guys. I'm going to take an extra 30 seconds and memorize the cards in here.
Yeah.
And I took out the notables in there, and they're like, what? You literally just did that? I'm like, yeah, I know my deck, so I have that space reserved. So
Yeah. Very cool.
That's pretty cool.
I think then there's something to be said for personal responsibility when you're playing your deck. If you're going to be attending tournaments, there's a measure of personal accountability where you need to be able to play your deck back and forth. I think it's just a matter of consideration and not being someone that people would want to play with again. Can be important in tournaments, but even if you want to spike a tournament and destroy it and win, there is still something to be said about just being efficient and using your time in the best way possible. However, there is the counterpoint that some people would consider a dirty play, which is intentionally taking a longer turn when the round timer is towards the end. And I'd like to
Yeah.
get your opinions on things like that and whether or not that should be an offense that could merit a game rules violation.
I am very pro 100% that should be a games rule violation. If you're really trying to angle shoot that hard that you're slow playing and ruining, a great tournament for like over 100 competitors, that's a problem, right? Like you can't be doing that. I don't even think you gain that much value out of it, right? If you look at standard tournament policies, wins worth so much more than draws, and
Yeah.
you're playing and you're screwing up the tournament for everybody else by running that gambit. Honestly, my honest answer is get good, play your deck, learn how to play, and
Yeah.
then do better. Like don't try and angle shoot that way. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Do better already.
Be better.
C4 in the chat says intentionally taking time to play toward time is the definition of stalling, which is cheating. And I
Exactly.
tend to agree with that take.
It is. That's in the rules. So
It's right in the rules. But people are hesitant to do that in cEDH because there is that aspect of it being a community-driven format. I think it's very hard for people to kind of dump that part of it when they enter a tournament. So, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that leans into actually something Chris and I were talking about recently, is the which I guess we're going to talk about here, politics and stuff like that,
Yep.
and the art of the deal, so to speak. Making deals in the game. Like, I'm here to win $4,000.
Right.
Shut up and play your cards.
Yeah. Or some chunk of $4,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing is, you as a tournament player too can always tell the difference, right? If you call a judge for somebody that's slow playing and they're slow playing because they're new or bad or this like their first tournament and they don't know, they're gonna get completely flustered. They're gonna be thrown off of their game. They're gonna be like, I don't know, like so scared. So a person that's doing it to be, just to try and cheese the system, they're just going to kind of pick up and keep playing as normal and try and angle shoot it in again. So it's really easy to spot, in my opinion, when you're in those games. You just need to be able to call a judge and then understand what's really going on there, and then learn to be vigilant on the ladder when they're going back to it again.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I've talked about with several guests. Judges are there literally for your benefit. please call them when you think you should. Like, even if you don't know the entire rules of Magic, if you think someone's doing something screwy, you can call a judge. That's what they're there for.
What about this aspect of it? Should the judges be more harsh? Like there was
Yes.
a lot of games rule violation being called, but there was no further action being taken. Should should there maybe be game loss being handed out?
Yes. 100%.
I think
100%.
so. I think there's some. I don't know if we're all the way up. It's tough. You want to be fair and balanced across the board, right?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
you are
Right.
balancing the two camps, like I said, right? You're going to get the new player that's like, this is my first tournament. I want to have a good time. I want to see what it's like, and it gets a little flustered by that. You don't want to just immediately like, oh, you're disqualified from this tournament because you don't know how to play Magic. Get out and get good. But you also like want to angle shoot and get rid of the people that are trying to angle shoot and get them out of your event as well. So I think it needs to be
Well,
worked on. I'm sure people smarter than I will come up with those
Yeah.
answers, but that's something needs to be done about it.
well, I definitely don't say kick them out of the tournament, but definitely a game loss. I don't know how. Like I think that could be like an avenue you take. Like let's say you can see you can see the fluster. You can see if they're flustered or not. But what about the people who are deliberately doing this? Like if you follow them throughout the day, you can maybe see a pattern. And maybe at the same time, you don't want a 3-player pod. Because some decks get worse, some decks get better. So I can see why there's a lot of game warnings being given out. But maybe we need to like definitely take it to the next level. Maybe if someone gets saying, all right, he got a game loss. Maybe they'll take it more seriously.
Yeah. C4 though in the
Mhm.
chat brings up another salient point, which is in EDH, in a normal, like in a 2v in a 1v1 format rather, a game loss is exactly that, a game loss, but there are 3 games in a match. In EDH, a game loss is a match loss, which is a much more severe policy, which is why I'm pretty sure that the normal enforcement in multiplayer Magic is 3 GRVs become a game loss. Is how I've seen it enforced.
The hard part with that though is to what Shani said is like you follow them throughout the tournament. By that point, it's already been done, right? They've
Right.
already wrenched up the entire tournament while you're waiting to get those accounts, right? So
Yeah.
if they're doing like 1, 3, and 5, you're like, all right, I got you on 5. It's like, well, you've already screwed up the entire tournament for
Mhm.
that day.
Like even if you want to like the thing is there's like a lot of times they're not even reporting the GRVs. They're just kind of be like, "Hey, don't do that.
Yeah,
Stop doing
exactly.
that." You know, it's not like, "Hey, you're slow playing intentionally. Here's a GRV. Do it again. You're out," kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
I know in a recent tournament I had a guy who did 3 GRVs and of different variations between one of them was slow play, and the judge was like, "Okay, have a nice day." And I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
what happened? Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, I've been that guy in tournaments. I'm not gonna say I haven't. Where you play to the clock, like you're behind, you don't want the loss. The next game you might can win. The 1 point does matter. I'm not saying playing for a draw isn't. It's terrible. I'm not disagreeing with it, but it's better than having no points, right? And sometimes you have to just play to that draw, and you play towards the clock. I, I don't agree with stalling. Like stalling, like oh, I'm making this game action. Cause as long as I'm making a game action, I'm taking progress in the game. So I'm like, it's hard. It's hard to really like figure out what is the correct pass. But I don't think we fully punish the draw. I don't know. Like there's conversations happening. Should the draw be 0 points?
0,
And I
yeah, that's
don't.
another option.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that because
no.
that means then what about DUIs? Like, are we now saying that if I want to lock into the top 16,
Do you mean
then
hold on, before we go any further? Do you mean IDs, intentional draws, and
yeah,
not
oh
driving
my
under
god,
the
Yeah,
influence?
yeah.
Okay,
did I say
all
driving
right.
under the influence? Yeah, driving under the influence while playing
If you
Magic.
get a DUI
Definitely,
at a tournament, you
definitely
go to
correct.
jail. Okay.
You go to jail.
You
I
go to
totally
jail.
agree.
Yeah,
No
yeah, you don't get
DUIs.
disqualified from a game. You go to jail. Go
Oh
directly to
my
jail.
god,
Um,
go directly to jail.
I
But
wonder
yes,
if
yes.
there. I wonder if there's some merit to something like a single point deduction for
For GRVs.
a GRV. Yeah. So like if there's a possibility of winning 5 points in a round from a win, and you commit GRVs, you
Lose a
Yeah, a
point.
single
Lose a
point
point,
deduction.
lose a half point, lose something like
Half a
that.
point, some amount of points.
So the thing about
It-
that would be it's gonna mess with all kind of tournament reporting and stuff like that.
It's not only that, it's tough because it messes with the other three players, right? They're stuck with a point where it could have been higher. I don't know, it's tough. I agree with
It's really hard.
I agree that you should play to the clock, right? I'm never not advocating that. The problem is
Yeah.
that these rounds are so a typical game of cEDH is a 75-minute timed round. If the round goes an hour over that, what you're basically telling me is it took an entire hour for an entire turn cycle to go around the table because you have your turns.
4 players.
That I have a problem with. How does it
Yeah.
take an entire hour to go around turns when we have a 75-minute turn round?
Have you not seen these games, sir? A lot of people out here playing not to lose. And if
Yeah.
you're playing not to lose, you can play a game for 4 hours.
We've got Ashani who was in the mess of it all day, having to watch and see everything that was happening. So yeah, I think it's
Playing
so
not-
easy for games to go way over, just because
Oh, yeah.
there's in turns specifically, there's so much room for competitors to be like, hey, before you make any play,
Yeah.
I'd like to
And
read you
that's
my
where-
dissertation that I've written
And
about teamwork in cooperative games. And once I get done with my dissertation, I would love some critique, please, because I've experienced that. I've experienced the 40 minutes over turn cycle.
Yeah. Let me explain to you the magical Christmas land scenario that's nowhere near possible to happen. Yeah,
Yes.
that in truth is the biggest problem, right? You're trying to slow play and confuse and misdirect and do all that crap in turns. And I understand the want and need, but it really overall hurts the bigger tournament as a whole. Play
Right.
your spells, try and win the game. You have to know what you're doing.
There is an aspect of gamesmanship, but there's also an aspect of like, just put your stuff on the stack and get it over with. Please, I would like to go eat lunch.
Correct.
Something, yeah. I gotta go to the bathroom real
Yeah.
bad, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get the judges involved. Go through with the steps you have to go through to get it done. You have to be in charge of that of your own tournament success.
Yeah, like definitely. Like there was a lot of judges sitting on the games that were going in time, and I'm like, is there a time where the judges just say you all need to shut up and put the card on the stack, and like let's
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, that's the thing. I mean, even in there, in mocks, there was still the judges. Multiple judges were sitting
Yeah.
in the chat with them, and they still took an extra 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, babe, definitely like, listen, the judges do a wonderful job.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm definitely not trying to shade on anyone here. But I'm like, maybe it's with us and the organization of the TOs, like say, let's get a little bit harsher. Let's make sure people understand that we don't want to be here 16 hours for a 1-day tournament. Like let's be a little harsher. We have people in different time zones all around the world. Like, I believe there was, I don't know where Bao was playing, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and he's been there from like come on, man, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I understand you enter the tournament and you like set aside that day, but when we're reaching a certain time limit, I think there should be cause for concern.
The thing that they don't realize that they're doing is not only are they hurting the tournament, but they are like you said, they're hurting the tournament staff. And then it gets more challenging for the tournament staff to want to continue to put on events like this
Yeah.
because of the time delay and because of the negative feedback that they're getting because of what's happening. So realistically, by doing that, you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting the entire tournament and the entire community as a whole. So knock it off.
All right. I think that gives us a pretty natural point to end that topic and move on to the next one, which I'd like to address, which is playing to the ladder in tournaments and when you should and should not do that. And furthermore, when your conduct in a match might benefit you in the ladder, but be seen negatively, because I think we've seen situations where that can happen, where you it kind of naturally goes with spite play, king making, whatever you want to call it, where you know that if this person wins a match, your breakers are good, but if the other person with a win on the stack wins the match, your breakers are bad. Uh, so you offer up a counter spell at something, knowing full well that the next person will win the game. There are situations like that happen in just friendly games and also in tournaments, right? Um, what do you think as far as EDH kind of being a social format, and as far as tournament EDH being something maybe slightly off center of that ideal? How do you feel about king making with regards to improving your position on the ladder? Is, I guess, a good question.
So as for me, as far as EDH being a social format, when I'm in a tournament, I'm not social about it at all.
Yes.
Correct.
I'm playing to
Yes.
win. So if there's a win attempt and I know if this resolves, I lose, and I have an answer for it, and there's 99, 100, whatever you want to call it, percent chance that the opponent wins next turn after me, I'm still going to put that win attempt on the stack because it's on the opponent, the next opponent, to correctly sequence and win the game, regardless of that. I've seen many people blunder. I've seen many people misplay. I've seen tons of times someone breaches and all of a sudden they go, oh, I
Miscount
miscounted.
it.
Crap, I'm out of cards. Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
Right.
Play your spells, cast your spells, and the chips lie where the chips lie.
Yeah.
I
Play
get
the
it.
game.
It's a sucky situation when you're the player that you're like, you're going to counter me literally as the win. I don't know that. He hasn't put the win on the stack yet. So it
Yeah,
has
it's
not
not on
resolved.
the
It hasn't
field.
happened. I could have more interaction in my hand. You don't know.
Mhm.
You just don't know.
Cast your spells. Play the game. Like,
Which
you know,
goes to the shut up and play line of merch coming soon. Okay, sorry.
that's we
It's like
we
my
were getting there.
catchphrase,
We
shut
were
up
getting
and
there.
play.
just take off your shirt. Like, just shut up and play. All right, we're good here. It's
Clark
you got to
Kent
do it.
style.
You got to play to your outs. You know what I mean? Like, there is the time, like Chris said. Like, hey, I've done it myself. I've put a win attempt on the stack with Breach Go. I miscounted my mana.
Yeah.
Yikes! You know what I mean? And next thing you know, hey, there it is. You know, it happens. We're all human. You know, if we were robots, well, then maybe we wouldn't make a mistake.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I've been hearing like the conversation of king making in tournament magic. I don't think that exists. I think that should definitely be. Let's if we want to take this format to a competitive level, we need to get that conversation out of the completely like king making in tournaments. It can happen. You play to the ladder. You play to whatever you need to play to, so you can make the bubble, get into the top 16, make your chances of winning the tournament better. So it feels bad when you think you put in a win on the stack and like, oh, you counter it and then the next player wins. Okay, maybe that's the strategy that I went to going into this match.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many variants you gotta play to it.
My question is along these lines because I saw a person, I will not say their name, but posted on Twitter that they had a win attempt countered with a known win attempt, like a known definite win in the next player's hand. And their win attempt was countered and the next player won. How do you feel about doing it when there's revealed information?
So that happened to me literally at Mox Masters in the last round I ended up playing. Um, Guy that was right after me had the win in his hand,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, I have to go for it.
Yeah.
And I showed my Thorkel combo, and the kid goes counter it. I said, well, I mean, he wins next. If you have something great, if not, we lose to him. Either
Yeah.
way, you know what I mean? Maybe he messes up his combo. That's kind of what I was hoping for because I still had a second attempt in there. But it's like, sure, let's go. And passed it. The kid won. I mean, granted, there was a
Yeah.
million squirrels, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's that the win attempt isn't on the stack yet. Your win attempt is you want me to king make? I am king making. I'm king making so I can win the game, not so anybody else can win the game.
Mhm.
And the best chance I can win the game right now is to not let your win attempt resolve and hope that the other player messes up.
So
If
the
they don't,
argument here
oh,
is sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the
You're good.
argument here is that your win percentage goes up even by an infinitesimal amount if you counter this now. So you play to your highest win percent.
Mhm.
Correct. If the
In a
ability on the
game of
stack says they win the game and I have a 0% chance of winning the game if that resolves,
Yeah.
I'm going to counter it, and I have now 0.001% chance, but that's still higher than 0.
Yeah, in Commander, you have a 25% chance to win the game. You have a 75% chance to lose. Anything that moves that ticker up towards the win percentage, I'm going for it.
Yeah.
I've been on this side of this conversation where I believe, like in a casual game, is different, but
Right.
if my win percentage is 5 versus 0, I'm still losing the game, so I'm not interacting. I've been big on that since I started Magic. I've thrown many. I guess people can say I've thrown many games
Yes, he
because
has.
of it. Yeah, but
Yep.
I'm not winning. Like if I'm playing to win, I am not winning. If you're the first one to go for it, the whole idea of playing Magic is for, if I'm sitting here, I am playing to win. So if I'm player 4 and player 1 goes for it, I am not interacting. That is just maybe a moral for me, but I'm not. I don't know if I should change my logic, but as you guys said, the win is on the stack. He might have messed up. He might have miscounted. The admirals might have killed him. You don't know. But for me, I don't know, man. I'll try again next turn, next game. I guess. I'm down with the interaction in my head.
And that's a fine approach. But I'm not gonna, after the game, if you like showed me a hand of counter spells and I could have won if you countered his thing, I'm not gonna be like, why didn't you do that? What the hell, man? I'd have been
Oh
like, all
no,
right,
definitely.
you chose not to cast your spell. This is Magic.
Yeah.
You can choose to put your spells on the stack, or you can
Or
choose
you're
not
not.
to. Make a call.
Yeah. In casual, that's a different story. That's a whole nother story. Like just friendlies? No. That's like you wanting to play Meta Knight and Brawl like the entire time. But like, in a tournament setting, okay, yeah, you chose not to. It's your right to cast your spells or not.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Perfect. Another thing that I would really like to talk about, because we've had some really good discussions here as a group, politics in cEDH, especially in a tournament setting. Number one, do you think that there's room for extensive politics in a tournament setting? And number two, do you think that there is a point at which the politicking should stop and the casting your spells should begin? I'd like
This
to
is
start.
Chris's favorite topic.
Yes, I'd like to
I
start with the Commander
I
Coffee Boys.
I have said multiple times on this show, shut up and cast your spells,
Yeah.
and that is my belief. I'm okay with a little bit of politics. I don't personally politic. I came up in 60 card formats, so I was very much. I'm not giving you my opponent an inch. I'm not telling the damn thing. I'm telling them they did the right thing. I'm not looking at anything like that. The problem I have when I'm playing these games, and a couple rounds of discussion is okay, but when I need someone to read back the notes of the conversation we're having over whether or not my wheel can resolve, is just like, this is too much. I don't need to go back and reread the cliff notes so I can figure out what's going on. Like, is the spell resolving? Like, if you have a good hand, counter it. If you don't.
Yeah.
I don't care. Make a
You
call.
might,
Stop
you might,
discussing.
you might miss the cliff notes, bro. You might need a refresher.
I mean,
Yeah,
Cliff Notes got me through school, so hey.
when we're 30
Exactly.
minutes in, the spell has been on the stack for the last half an hour, and I got to go back and be like,
Okay.
wait, what did he say in paragraph 2? What was that? I can't. I don't have time for
There's a
that. I really don't.
stenographer sitting in the corner going,
Here's
Yeah,
my Cliff
I don't
Notes
have time for that.
confession. Here's my Cliff
Yeah.
Notes confession. I went to Bible college for a year back in the day, and we had to read the entire Bible, and we would have to write chapter summaries, like summaries on books, and I Cliff Noted the Bible. So that's my Cliff Notes confession. Yeah. I passed. I did really good, by the way. They're
Hell yeah.
really
That's all that
good
matters.
summaries.
It's all that matters. I subscribe to my favorite line. I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard it a long time ago. Is your opponent does not have your best interest in mind.
Yes.
The end. Like, I'm gonna sit there. I in Oko, I was playing against a kid, and he said he had an Aura of Silence on board, and he said, "Does anybody need to tutor to deal with this?" And he motioned towards the other player's board. I said, "I absolutely need to tutor to deal with that."
Yeah.
I go, "But I cannot deal with it until it's my turn." And he goes, "Oh." I go, and I'm like, "I'm gonna be real with you, Chief. I only got an intuition. And he
Yeah.
blew it up, and I tutored for the combo.
Yeah.
You were
know what I
not.
mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Those are those loopholes and not specific
I mean, you
things.
dealt
Right.
with it on your turn.
right. I
Yeah,
ended up punting.
I mean-
Like, moral of the story is I ended up punting because I miscounted my mana because I'm bad at this game, and really, hey, here's what it is. But it's still, it boils down to, like, I did not have his best interest in mind
Yeah.
at all. Like, I wanted to win the game. Like, that was my best interest. I'm gonna do what makes me win the game. What's gonna move my number up to win the game? I'm gonna put a win condition on the stack. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to win that game. Whether that means me countering that rule of law effect so that I could take better advantage of it, or countering the person trying to get rid of the rule of law effect, or tutoring with intuition to try and put my win
Yeah.
condition in there. I don't care. It's my game to lose.
Yeah. So there's
friendlies,
counter politing, right? Sorry,
Right,
go ahead, Chris.
exactly.
In friendlies, do that, like make partners, do stuff, fun stuff. But if you're playing tournaments, no one's gonna.
No one's your
try
friend.
and no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, you can win now because I'm gonna remove the rule of law for you.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about that. That's not happening. No one's going to do that. And if they do, congratulations, you got very lucky.
Right.
They
And I
get
mean,
as
there
well.
there was in I believe it
Marchesa,
was
right?
in no Oktoberfest, I think.
Oko, yeah, Oko.
Yeah, where I think Alana ended up winning because the Anala player let her hit the person and ended up getting a D-tutor off of it, if I remember correctly, and just everything broke loose. All hell literally broke loose, and it was the most wonderful thing ever.
There's also the notable Marchesa incident where Koibito won because an abrupt decay came down on Curse Totem or something in the final game. Yeah.
That happens so often because people don't know how to play stacks. They don't know they're always so afraid of stacks pieces. They're like, oh god, that's preventing me, but they don't realize that it's preventing another player from interacting at all.
Yeah.
That null rod sucks for you, but look at the guy playing Shorokai. He can't do anything.
Yeah.
That's because stacks is bad and you shouldn't play it.
I mean, I've come off
Okay,
stacks.
I brought you on to talk about a different issue. We can't do this every week with every guest.
As a fellow
just
stacks
following the
player,
tradition of the show.
No, as a newly founded stacks player, I cannot agree with this.
Oh,
I cannot agree.
As an opponent of the newly founded Stacks player, I can agree. Stacks is bad, and you shouldn't.
I cannot agree.
I love stacks. I was a stack. My first commander deck that I built myself was Grand Arbiter Augustus IV. Chris could attest to this. And I used to make those 4-hour games in friendlies were me. That was me causing it. I used to stasis them out with my Derevi deck that Chris showed me, mind you. He's the one that's like, hey, you're going to love this. And sure as shit, I was like, I love this. I love making people miserable. And it was it. You know what I mean?
Great. It's great. Here's what I think. Where people like to say stacks is bad and wah Crimea salt or whatever. I'm just saying.
Very eloquent.
People don't know how to play under stacks. That is the problem.
Facts.
They want to play their magic cards. They want to resolve their spells, and they don't care what happens to the rest of the table. Like, you can play under the stacks, sculpt your hand, and wait until it's the correct moment to get rid of it.
Correct.
Like, I've seen people throw games because I don't feel comfortable playing with this null-rod in play. But okay, what about the guy who has 8 mana in rocks?
Exactly.
Do you not care?
No,
I don't care. Listen. Exactly. Yes. Look at the short card player.
Look at the short card player with under the null rod.
I do have to end this conversation now because we do have a follow-up event happening, a CEDHU seminar happening. So I do need to end it there. I will have.
He's trapped with us. So
I have 2 final questions for everyone here, and that is number 1. What if you had to pick a number of the seconds, a number of seconds you are allowing someone to politic before you say shut up, or before, if they don't shut up, you call a judge. I need a number in seconds. I'll start with Chris. He seems probably the most vehement about this. So
5.
5 seconds. Okay.
5.
Billy.
So mine is 120 seconds, and that counts as your tutor time and everything like that too.
Your tutor time and
As-
everything. 2
Yep,
minutes.
so-
Okay.
Yep.
And
If you don't get your stuff done to there, Judge, come here.
and Ashani,
I agree with 120 also.
120. Okay, I guess I have 3 questions because MTG the Epic Storm wants to know what the best enchantment that costs 3 generic and 1 green is in cEDH. I'll start with Chris.
Oh God! Don't have me start with me. I don't play green cards. They're bad.
Okay, I'll start with Billy.
Oh my! Get
3
him out of
generic
here,
and 1
bro.
green.
Get this
3
guy out of
generic
here.
and 1 green.
I can't even think of what that would be.
So, Brett, you're a troll. I
Is
swear
that
to
wait? Is
God.
that defense of the heart?
It's
Defense of the Heart is one.
it's
Okay.
it's
Pattern of Rebirth is
Oh.
what they're looking for.
Says
Oh.
Ashani. And Ashani, what's yours?
Definitely Pattern.
Hamster Mafia says doubling season. I'll go with that one. Our last question, only for our guests, not for you, Ashani, because you know what's coming. Chris, Billy, what is the sexiest soup?
Clam chowder.
Hey, that's a weird answer. Please justify.
Oh man, you get it in the bread bowl, and like it just looks so much nicer than everything else.
Okay,
He's
all right,
not
that's
wrong.
it's
He
fine
used to live
now.
in Seattle. It's
Okay,
fine.
it's fine
It's
now.
acceptable. It's acceptable. Loaded baked potato soup.
Baked
Duh.
potato soup is a good answer. Is a good answer. All right, everybody, we're going to be right back. Thank you so much to our guests, Commander and Coffee, Billy and Chris, CMDR_coffee on the interwebs. We so grateful that you guys would come out and hang with us, and you're going to see a little bit more of Chris's face. By a little bit more, I mean roughly an hour more of Chris's face in just a few minutes here. Thanks so much for joining us. We have been Eminence TV Live, and we'll be right back for a cEDHU seminar. Stay tuned. everybody, we're back with the tEDH seminar, threat assessment, and your role within it. Hosted by the inimitable and maybe familiar Cypher, and also stream favorite and good buddy Accepted. Say hello.
Hi.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Hello for the first time since the first stream ever.
Yes, yeah. It's been a while, but listen, we're here for a good time and not a long time. I will give you guys the floor. I'll shut up and I'll pass some audience questions on to you if they become relevant. But the floor is yours, and have fun.
Thanks. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this cEDHU seminar series. We are here, and we are here to talk about threat assessment and your role with it as it applies to cEDH. So to get started, to get a little bit to know about us, Alex, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Alex, or Accepted. I started playing Magic in Return to Ravnica, and then quit again around Khans of Tarkir, and came back to play Commander when the Dominaria set came out. I love playing my good King Kenrith, and Sultai is probably my favorite color combo just because green-black removal makes me happy, and black-blue is just ugh. I very much enjoy, my first cEDH deck was the infamous Chulane list from Joking 101. Yep. What about you, Chris?
That was a good one. I can definitely say before I get into me that you definitely have a love of Kenny, and I think he did you well this past weekend in the December Mox Masters event. Good job. Congrats on the top 4.
Yeah, I finally got all my sleep from after that event. It took me 2 full days to get back to where I am now.
Finally fully recovered. Well, great to hear it. Well, as he said, I'm Chris, also known as Cypher Online. I am an old school player. I started playing back in Onslaught back in 2002. I was playing Commander back before they called it Commander, when they called it EDH, and we had to use generals and really had to use the Elder Dragons. It was a Wild West back in the day. It was old times. I'm a huge fan of Storm and combo decks. Some of my favorite cards are Doomsday and Tendrils of Agony. I absolutely love those style mechanic. I think the Storm scale is apt and should be abolished. We should get more Storm cards. Prince Stormcrow, you cowards. My favorite colors are, in fact, Grixis. I love Grixis piles. They're my favorite thing to be doing. Luckily, in Commander, I hear they're pretty good. And then my very first start to building something resembling a cEDH deck was when the Kess Commander was released. I absolutely fell in love with it. I loved the 1-card intuition. It kind of made me feel like I was doing like the Doomsday thing and able to storm off and do all that fun stuff. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So looking into threat assessment today we're going to kind of talk through several different topics about what it is and how does it work on. So just the rough definition of threat assessment is that it's a system of identifying, inquiring, assessing, and managing potentially dangerous or violent situations. Luckily in Commander, I don't think anybody has a knife to or anything like that. So really what we're talking about here is in-game semantics to understand where you need to target your removal. Do you need to counter this? What's that looking through like that there? So a lot to unpack here as we kind of go through what this looks like and how this functions with it.
Wait, you've never fist fought your Commander friends?
I mean, that's on the side, but that not in a tournament. That'll get you disqualified pretty quickly.
Yeah. That might happen. You're right. But yeah, identifying, inquiring, assessing, and managing. The managing part is by far the hardest part of this. Oh, Cork is tried and he is small and mighty. Well,
yeah, that's fair. So looking at it and looking at how we can apply it, Alex, what are some different tools and ways that we can apply our general knowledge of threat assessment to cEDH?
The ways we can apply our knowledge of threat assessment to cEDH is by looking at the board texture as it were, and seeing where, like, what commanders there are, like how many cards in hand, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think a big chunk of it comes from, and I think one of the things that a lot of players do is they also kind of get laser focused into it, right? You can see a commander that maybe you don't like, or maybe you know what they do, and they're building some advantage, and you're kind of tunnel visioning on that commander too. But you really want to constantly, reassess and take stock of what the board looks like, and assess things like cards in hand. I think is a big one, right? The
Oh
person
yeah,
with more
cards in
cards.
hand. Does someone have a Rhystic Study, fish?
Yeah, mana
Yeah, stuff
available
like
is a
that.
big one, right? If they have 15
Absolutely.
mana, that means they could probably do a lot of things, things like that, right?
Well,
Just not
15 mana but one card in hand is sometimes less scary than 4 mana but 15 cards in hand.
Correct, and it's a constantly varying scale that we want to go through. So it's always a good idea that as you look at applying these topics today, that you constantly throughout your game learn to kind of reassess and evaluate kind of what the board texture looks like as you go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So getting into our first major topic on threat, that's identify. So whenever we're starting to determine a threat, the first thing you really need to do is identify who is the threat. What is the threat? What's the issue going on here? So for me, for a person that like really likes to enjoy Grixis decks, I would be looking to identify people with open mana for counter spells. So I can, if I can't cast my ad nauseum for that reason, does somebody have a big creature that's going to punch me in the face and make that worse? Who's threatening? What's the threatening position? And if it's nobody, do you consider yourself to be the threatening position, right? Are you a person that's is the most threatening person at the table, and how do you mitigate that, or what does that look like?
And often, if you are the most threatening person at a table, trying to mitigate that threat to other people, that's a very big skill here too. Like telling them, like, "Hey, I'm not a threat to you because of X, Y, and Z."
Absolutely. Like there's lots of times where the break points between winning and losing a game of being able to properly, you know, push the perceived there's two real notions here. There's perceived threat and then there's the actual threat, right? You want to do your best in the course of a game to identify the actual threat and make sure that the perceived threat is away from you as much as humanly possible.
Oh yeah, that is something that I am relatively good at in these games because I just have a few mana. Don't worry about it. I don't have a dark side in hand. Definitely has a dark side in hand.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the most important thing. So when you're identifying these threats, like we talked about, some common things to look forward to are, the mana they have available, the commanders they're playing. In Commander, that's one of the biggest pieces you have is Commander. If you look on our little slide, Pepe is identifying Rograk as a threat because Rograk is a commander that comes down on turn one, right? So his threat level is pretty high because he comes down early. Whereas if somebody's playing something like Kenrith, I know Alex somewhat has to get 5 mana. So my baseline is I'm looking at the Rograk player and saying, okay, they're on 0, they're getting their commander out and doing their commander thing a lot faster than somebody like Alex is with Kenrith.
Oh,
And that's
absolutely. When you look at me at a table, you say, okay, turn 2 or 3, with just the commander being on the table, you're like, okay, that's a threat now. But with Rog, you see that there's free interaction up turn 1. It's a terrifying experience.
yeah. And then that's kind of what we're looking at when we're looking to identify is we're really looking to gauge and use all of the information we're provided in the course of the game to kind of figure out where that threat goes. And that's a good baseline standard there. So taking a look at those things like mana value, mana cost, cards in hand, color identity is a big one, right? Are they playing, colors that tend to have controlling options like blue? Or are they playing white and have the tools that are good in that color? And kind of understanding what each threat within the own color identity is also powerful. So you can kind of perceive what threats your opponent could develop later on in their turns.
Absolutely.
So other information that can be brought about too as well is things like seed order, right? What position they're in, right? Maybe, that Rograk player is in 4th and Alex is in 1st and, has an explosive start. Well, now automatically I may shift focus a little bit to the Kenrith player just because of the power that their seed order grants them in a game. Other things like their mulligan decisions, right? If Alex kept the first 7, I'm paying attention to that number, right? A first 7 when you get a free mulligan typically means like that hand's good. Like there's no other way to put it. That hand is probably pretty good. And then general understanding on how your own deck fares in the pod. Maybe your deck is designed to beat up on Kenrith and doesn't do well against Rog, or vice versa, and you need to understand how your deck is going to fare in this threat in given environment.
Yeah, and understanding how your own deck plays is a lot to do with experience. You will understand after 30 games, like maybe less, maybe more, what decks you actually have to fear. Like what cards you actually have to fear. Do you know that you're playing against a Stacks deck that plays a Null Rod? That would be annoying to me. Or a Grafdigger's Cage, or Torpor Orb, or things like that. You need to understand what hurts you and what helps you in a game. So that is extremely important to see who your threat is. Your threat isn't always the threat, too. That is often something that's very difficult to establish.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. For example, if you take I'm going to use Kenrith a lot here.
Yeah, it's fairly easy. I'm the guy.
if a turn 2 Dranith comes down in play, my threat level on Kenrith has maybe not decreased all the way, but it has significantly gone down from where I initially had it if that Dranith ends up resolving and sticking on the board, because I know that commander is now taken offline. I understand there are other ways to win through the deck list, but at face value, with the information that I am provided with, I can kind of bump that down and see and reassess now who's the most important person, and is the Dranith even the most important threat at the table, right? Is it doing something that's actively manipulating the game state in a way that's unfavorable to me?
Well, you as a Grixis player, almost certainly, Mr. Breach.
Yeah, I don't like that card. We won't talk about that. I said earlier I don't like green. I don't like white either, to be fair. But yeah, so you want to take that into consideration. And like we said, it's an ever moving target, which we'll get into, but paying attention to things that if a person tutored before, right? Saying that 2 players each have 5 cards in their hand, but one player has drawn off the top for those 5, and the other player cast 2 spells that put specific cards into their hand potentially, is another factor when you're determining kind of who's more threatening at that table in that approach.
Yeah, and if that person that tutored twice has mana available, like
Correct.
if they have 0 mana available, you can just say, okay, on their turn they're going to Dockside, and then do a thing.
They're going to do something, but they're not going to do something right now. But if they're untapped, then there's a thing that they can do right now. So we want to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So the next thing you can do is you can inquire. So we are a format with multiple players. We are a format with multiple things. You can kind of inquire to the table as to what their thoughts are. See where they're thinking. We talked about preserved threat and actual threat. That's different per player. See where their thoughts are. See where they're at. They may not always be honest with you, but they could tell you, where they think their threat is, or what their current thought process is as to what the most threatening thing is. And you can really use that to help construct your own thoughts and opinions into the course of the game.
Use everything that's available to you. Other players are something that you can base things off of. Like using them to you'll think like, okay, they're going to tell me they're not the threat. And sure, that's fine. They will give you other things that you maybe didn't think of. They will show you information by things they don't say and things they do say. It's interesting to say the least.
I have played many a game where I've said, like, what do we think about this? And someone's like, oh my God, he can do this. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. He can do that if that resolves. Hold up. And that helped me to reevaluate where my threat was at the table, because I didn't think it was that particular spell that was on the stack. But it turned out that maybe I had to reevaluate and rethink through that aspect on there, right?
Yeah, there's some cards in some decks that you're like, oh, that's not an issue at all, which are throwing red flags for everyone else.
And it's a good idea to understand, like we said, the importance of who everybody else is perceiving, because I could be looking at Alex and going, okay, he is definitely a threat. I need to stop him right now. And then somebody else is going, yeah, but John over there isn't really that scary, is really terrifying. Like, he's threatening a win on his turn. We need to answer him. So we can kind of see where everybody's focus is at, and who's who's pointing their removal spells and who's going to support and what decisions to allow certain things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And some players aren't usually into that though. So you can look at, like, some players will say, just play your spells. That
me.
makes things, yeah, well, you still talk. Don't even. Just play your spells, but like also Ashani.
Correct.
Ashani has 6 pieces of layered interaction in his hand. Because he's Ashani. He walked past me in the hallway and showed 2 wing cons.
So those are all interesting things you want to gather when you're acquiring. To note, I don't want this to make this a lengthy conversation, but having a quick pulse check from the table is always a good thing when you're really trying to determine these threats that you need to be paying attention to at the table. It also helps as a great learning opportunity to learn new cards that are potentially scary, because in my opinion, it's never the last card that's the most important. It's the fourth card. It's the fourth card before that. That's the card you should have really responded to.
Oh yeah, like the Thassa's Oracle's not the issue. The Nas was the issue.
Correct. And even some cases, but before that, it was even the man. You could even argue that it was the mana to get to the Nas that was also kind of critical to that sense.
Yeah, and even before that, you could say the commander, which gave him a protected everything else.
Those ROG players. What? Okay. So now let's move on. You have gathered some of that knowledge. You've built your own judgments. You've inquired through the table. Now it's time to really start taking that information and assessing the boards and assessing the game state and kind of figuring out kind of where you need to go and what the nuances look like for this particular game.
Yeah, absolutely. Assessing your own threats is quite difficult because there can be so many and it will change rapidly based on other players. It won't even be your own actions that will change your threats. It's so there's the stacks problem that is everyone knows. You can remove the stacks piece, but you have to try to win or somebody else will win before you. And what am I trying to say? You need to see what affects your opponents and what doesn't affect your opponents. If you remove the Dranith, then you can see, okay, I can play my commander, but they can also play their breach. They can also play their commander. They can do things that you didn't exactly expect to begin with.
I think the great example of that, I call it the abrupt decay heard around the world, was at the first Marchesa, where the Tim Natana player abrupt decayed the suppression field, which let the Magda player go off and win the game. If you kind of took these tools and you assessed and you realized, okay, for me personally, the suppression field is causing me a problem, right? I have my win on the board. If I can get to my turn, if I abrupt decay this suppression field, I can win the game right now. But if you assess and you look at the board state and you realize, okay, so now if that's removed, who's the threat, right? And then you look at it and you go, oh, it's the Magda player, because they can literally win the game at instant speed once that card is off the board. It kind of helps nuance those decisions from occurring, I think, is kind of what we're looking at there. And that's really important when you're gathering this type of information.
Yeah, specifically for that environment, that person didn't understand how Magda worked, and also they looked too close at what they were doing and not what their opponents were doing.
Right. They were doing a very bad job of threat assessment.
They were tunnel visioning.
Yep.
Is what I was trying to say.
So Alex, how often would you say in a given we'll say turn of EDH or commander or whatever, would you have to assess the board state? Is it every time the spell's cast I need to be reassessing? Is it, once a game?
It is. I wouldn't say there's a specific every single time this happens. It's every time someone speaks, every time someone does anything, you're assessing the threats. If someone kind of peeks that they have a counterspell in their hand accidentally, then your threats have changed slightly. Like, every time a spell is put on the stack, every time someone speaks. It's constant. There is no hard and fast rule.
Yeah, and as you as listeners, as you kind of practice this, it does get easier. I would say for probably definitely Alex, people like me and Alex here, um, when an action is made, we're kind of it becomes kind of second nature. It's like riding a bike, right? We're already making these quick decisions and saying, okay, does that matter? No. Okay, my threat level doesn't change. Does it matter? Yes. Okay, let me take a quick second. Got it. I'm good. I'm back in the game, reevaluating. It just takes time and practice to get there, but it's a skill that as you practice and pick up on will greatly help you in the course of the game.
Especially doing it quickly is something that you will learn. You might need to, at the beginning, say, hold on, give me a second. This is on the stack. And then you can assess and then you can respond. It will become quicker and you can just look at it, think, what is this? How does this affect me? And then just move on in a split second after a while.
The other big thing that I kind of wanted to riff on a little bit on assessing here is obviously a lot of people can quickly identify when a person puts something like an ad nauseum on the stack that that's a scary card. That is a card that means that this player is trying to win the game. But when you're assessing, maybe they're casting a removal spell or they're trying to counter a wheel effect or anything like that, right? You want to take the moment to assess, okay, why are they making this action? Like what's the benefit that they're getting, or why are they perceiving that something like a wheel is a threat? Well, it's pretty easy to deduce that, right? They're trying to counter the wheel because they feel like their hand is good enough that it can win without needing to get brand new cards into their hand, or they have cards in their hand that they do not want to put into the graveyard or shuffle back into their library. So always take that moment to understand, even though you don't think, actual counter spell is that threatening of a card in this case because it's not countering your spell, but why is the opponent choosing to consider this particular card a threat to them?
Or not even that they have cards in hand that they don't want to get rid of. It's more sometimes that they don't want to give their opponent the resources to deal with anything. They don't want
Correct.
their opponent to have any resources. Was this wheel cast on 7 or was this wheel cast on 2 cards in hand? It's entirely dependent on everything in the game.
Yep. It's very critical to look through that game and understand those nuances, and this is all goes above the onboard threats, right? Which is pretty easy to understand. If you're in my world of storm combo and somebody has a rule of law, I know where my threat is. My threat is that rule of law. I need to get it out of the way so I can continue to play Magic.
Yeah, your threat is the rule of law and damping sphere.
But I'm also, you want to, while you're assessing this, and we talked a lot about that perceived threat versus that reality. I don't want to just and the Marchesa play. I don't want to just remove the rule of law at first opportunity, right? You want to take the time and set yourself up as a lower threat until it's go time, right? Until you're ready to no longer be the threat and you want to push that perceived threat. So make sure while you're assessing, you understand that your opponents are as well, and that they're going to admit you want to seem weaker than you are if you can help it. There are times where you just can't and you have to cast your spells and do your thing, but it's always a good idea to try and mitigate that as much as possible.
Absolutely.
All right, now that we know that, let's look about managing it, which is, in my opinion, kind of really where the fun part comes in, is managing the threat. And we talked a lot about this, but it really is compromised on a few of the things, which is, what can you do in your current situation? What does your turn order look like? How can I move threat around and do what I need to do? How can I manage a threat without using a card, right? That's a critical key place you can do just by using your words or speaking or making perceived gestures and notions that you've talked about.
Yeah, you can ask your not teammates, but the other players to maybe go for a abrupt decay. Since you're in Grixis, you can't get an abrupt decay, but maybe I can. Uh, there is some things that, well, it makes things easier.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, when we talked about, and this is why this is fourth in the list, because we talked about inquire earlier too, right? When we're inquiring about, I talked about, if there's a rule of law in play, as a Grixis player, I need to remove that rule of law, right? But if I get the feeling that, Alex is on Kenrith, and I know there's a chance he could be playing Abrupt Decay, and I really need him to support the initiative of removing the rule of law, can I inquire, understand that he also doesn't like that card, and then sculpt a position where I can manage the perceived threat and put it so heavily on this rule of law player that Alex will do basically, as you see in this waste management card, the dirty work for me, and remove that rule of law so I can have the opportunity and not have to waste my resources or mana to get there.
It is very possible to do. You have to be good at mind control as Gustav is, but it's possible.
I don't know many people that are, but it's possible.
It is only if you're that good, though. I do think that there are ways that you can just put the threat on someone else constantly, unless you are in a board position that just makes it so they're like, yeah, shut the fuck up. It's you can always say like, well, look how many cards he's drawing after you've tutored. Like, he has 9 cards in hand. He can stop whatever I got. Or the rule of law player is a Winota, let's say, and has 12 creatures on board. And you're like, oh, it has to be the Winota player. Use your Toxic Deluge. Or something of the sort.
So I guess my question in managing it, right, which is probably in my opinion one of the harder and most fun parts of this particular topic, is how often are you doing that in a game, Alex? How, again, same question as before, but how often are you kind of
How often am I
managing
managing it?
and mitigating around those threat tables where you're trying to push issues to other places, or deterministic those answers?
I would say I am trying to manage my threats as often as there are threats. And the actual practice of managing them, probably whenever the threat is so great that I have to. The last possible moment, I would try to at least.
How often is there a perceived threat that you make the decision to not manage and kind of push off onto other players to manage? Would you say that's a
Oh, all the
strong
time.
situation? Or yeah, okay, I agree.
All the time. Especially with rule of law effects. Since I'm a deck that can often play around them, I do not care. I'm like, yeah, I'll just draw cards. That's fine. That's cool. I'll just draw cards. And I will sculpt a hand that will get myself out of it and win on the same turn.
Correct, and that's a great nuance there, right? So in a game, in someone like when you're looking at this and you're doing your cost based analysis and you're kind of taking a look at it, when you have someone like Alex, he's not going to care about that rule of law because he has all of the time in the world. In fact, it's in some cases it's probably beneficial to him that it's existing. Whereas I'm a person that's trying to remove it. So understanding and managing your opponents in this conversation is also very important to handling this threat. I may be very much on the stance of we need to remove this rule of law right now. But what's the gain, right? Are you gaining as much as your opponent is by removing it? Are you not? Should it happen? Those are questions that you need to deduce in the middle of the board states, and they can be challenging and they can be tough. But you do have enough information that you can typically come to a pretty justifiable decision one way or the other as to those outs in your deck.
And you don't always have to remove these things either. If it's like Archon of Emeria, you could just dress down on that person's end step and then go off. Because you know that if you don't succeed, well, Chris isn't getting a turn with that dress down.
Correct, and that's a lot into a different topic, which is deck building philosophy. But it adds to understanding when you're managing the threats as to the cards in your deck that can manage the threats. Right? How many cards can deal with the potential piece or problematic card versus how many what card? What's the best card? What's the worst card in your deck? What to do from that? I think a great example from there is there are ways in Alex's deck, in a Kenrith deck, for example, that he can help protect and support those other initiatives if he wants to too, right? It's not only like trying to remove the current threat, but it's managing and protecting the things that are not threats to you that are threats to your opponents as well.
Yes. For example, that damping sphere I was talking about earlier. Vast majority of the time, I'll protect that against the Grixis player. The majority of the time. Sometimes I want to breach as well, and it's a moving target. It always is.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conundrum, right? Because there's never really there's objectively a right or wrong at the end of the game. You can look back and you can say, oh yeah, I should have done this, I should have done that, I didn't know. But there's enough information that's public that you can draw your conclusions, but you also have to take into account that hidden information that you don't know. But being able to protect an easy thing on the board that's essentially eliminating a player that you don't want to be a part of the game right now is very strong when you're managing that threat, while forcing other players to look at that dampening sphere. So, in that context, I'm still looking at that dampening sphere, even though Alex is protecting it. I'm still not on Alex. Alex still isn't on my radar. It's still that dampening sphere. So that just gives him almost a runway to run away with the game.
Yeah, and another thing that you can think of with this is stuff like, oh god, where I was going somewhere with this. I was gonna go somewhere with that. Well, there's
I
cards
gave
like
you a runway.
yeah, you did. You let me run away with the game, but I ran away with my thoughts instead. Um, there's stuff like the Mormonator said, Rug of Smothering, that won't be an issue on your first, second, third, or fourth spell, but will be an issue later on. It will be an issue once you try to go through your line, once you try to actually win the game. You've lost 10 life. And you get to a critical point in the game where things aren't working like your Ancient Tomb or something like that. And sometimes I know where I was going to go with this. There's cards like Seedborn Muse from Mox Masters that over the game created so much value that a person would run away with the game. But at the beginning, you're like, I don't want to deal with this 5-mana green spell. It has done nothing. But it will create enough value over the game that this person has no way to really lose the game.
Correct. I think that boils down to an interesting conundrum. Another good way to spin it too is if you look at the example we talked about with Alex protecting the dampening sphere to shut me down. Eventually there's a world in Kenrith, because Kenrith is king and does everything, that Alex would need to sort of create a storm combo win, and then at that point he has now switched faces entirely and is now looking to he's gone through this threat assessment, right? He's identified, he's inquired, he's assessed, and now he's ready to manage and remove the dampening sphere, because that's now the biggest threat to him, preventing him, based off the context of his hand, from winning the game. So I think
Yeah.
all of that kind of compiles kind of what we're looking for in threat assessment. It is a, and I think Alex can agree with me, and you can speak more of this. It's a vastly moving target, right? There's no definitive answer where I can say this is a threat and you need to counter it. This is not a threat and it doesn't matter. It's a constant changing avenue as to what's going on there. Because I think a lot of people look at the cards too, which is a platform I really want to talk through, on like Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach is a threat. It absolutely is, but it's also, you should have understood what that board state looked like, or you want to start getting to the point where you perceive that the breach is the scary card before the breach hits the stack, right? You want to understand what the opponent's looking for and how they're managing their threat to get them to that point.
Yeah, sometimes you didn't look at their graveyard, and that can lead to you losing.
Correct.
Especially with that breach.
Especially with that breach. That breach would be good though. So that's what we're looking at when we talk about threat. I think it's a very interesting topic. I think for a lot of players, it's nuanced. A lot of players, when we talk about threat assessment and we talk about games, you always hear the term, I don't have to worry about Kenrith. He doesn't come down until turn 4, and he's a slower deck, and you have to look at the Grixis deck, and they fold over on turn 2. Just from my own perspective, that's pretty poor threat assessment. I have absolutely seen games where Alex turn 2s out of nowhere. It can happen; those hands exist, and I've seen lots of games where on turn 5, turn 7 that the Grixis deck ends up pulling it through. So don't take a lot of these decks at face value and just do a one-time pass when the game starts as to what the threat looks like. Constantly be evaluating, constantly be understanding what the context of the game looks like, who's in control of the game, who's behind, who's struggling with a certain stacks piece, who's who's doing what in the game and what are their outs and what are they looking to do in that game. So with that, that's kind of a rough draft, is the rough outline as to what threat assessment is and how it works through. Alex, did you have any other foresights or knowledge or deep dives into threat assessment that we can share with these wonderful listeners today?
I think we covered it fairly well, or you covered it fairly well.
We did a good job. This was a team collaboration. We identified, we managed, we inquired, and we assessed what the threats were and what we needed to talk about today. And I think we did a good job analyzing those.
Yeah.
So, chat, while we kind of wrap this up, do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything we can help answer? Want to know why Underworld Breach is a threatening card, why Ad Nauseam is threatening? We'll be more than happy to answer that.
Scotty, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you, Scotty.
Scotty's
Thank
always
you.
the threat. That's the actual answer to this.
I mean, that is a fair assessment.
Scotty and Ashani are threats.
Ashani walks past you in the hallway with 3 redundant win cons, though.
Yeah, he was the threat before he walked in the door.
Well, I want to take this time to thank everybody for listening today. As we've talked about, I have been Chris, aka Cypher, and Alex, Accepted. We're very happy to talk more about this. If you need to talk to us, hit us up in CDHU. We're always happy to help answer more questions and help understand more about threat. There's an entire channel to threat that we'll be more than happy to be in there to help answer further questions.
Yeah, and as Mr. K said, everyone is going to assess differently. Not everyone sees the same things on board. Not everyone sees threat the way you do.
You both did a really great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, barring any questions, I think that concludes this CEDHU seminar. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Looking forward to seeing this on YouTube and all the questions that go up on there. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye.